do that using the QA tab on the right-hand side of your screen. So just a reminder, I am Justin Rice, VP of Ecosystem at the Stellar Development Foundation. Today, I'm joined by two panelists, Philip Meng, Head of Liquidity and Markets at the Stellar Development Foundation, and Dima Gamiza, co-founder of Ultrastellar. I'd love it if each of you could briefly introduce yourselves to the audience. For anyone who's not already familiar, tell us a little bit more about you, starting with Phil.
Thanks, Justin. Excited to be here. My name is Phil Meng. I head up liquidity and markets at Stellar. Previous to Stellar, I spent about 15 years in traditional finance, trading equity derivatives. Since I've been at Stellar, I've been working on improving liquidity for Stellar assets across the ecosystem for our payments use case.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. Dima.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dima. I'm Ultrastellar co-founder. Ultrastellar is a company behind such projects as Lobster, Stellar Term, Stellar X. We develop on Stellar since 2014, and I'm very excited about Meridian and happy to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to talk about AMMs on Stellar, and I just want to give a quick overview. It's been a big start to November for the Stellar network. So as many of you may know, on November 3rd, validators voted to accept the Protocol 18 upgrade, which is the most significant upgrade since Stellar's inception, because it introduces a powerful new feature to the network, which is the ability to create automated market makers, or AMMs, as we'll probably call them from now on. AMM functionality, it allows developers to empower users to create and deposit into liquidity pools, and it extends path payments to execute trades against those pools when they offer a better rate of exchange than the order books. So AMMs, they're simple by design, and they have the potential to democratize market making and liquidity provision, thereby enabling cheaper, faster, and more usable cross-border payments. This is an exciting development, not only because Stellar is one of the earliest layer 1 blockchains to incorporate AMM functionality at the protocol level, but also because SDF and the greater Stellar ecosystem collaborated to accelerate development so that AMM functionality was immediately available to end users at launch. So I just want to note that companies like Ultrastellar and Stellarport who've built these AMM interfaces, these are independent, they're not affiliated with the SDF. And honestly, that's part of what's cool, right? The ecosystem is driving innovation to take advantage of the new feature. So as a result, 2 weeks after launch, there are over 1,500 liquidity pools and over 6,000 liquidity providers on the network. Many existing asset pairs have lower spreads than ever before, and increasingly, new assets are able to bootstrap liquidity. In fact, according to the Stellar X dashboard, which we'll hear about later, there have been over $13 million worth of deposits into liquidity pools, and 24-hour trade volume exceeded the $1 million mark yesterday. So today, we're going to get into it. Why are AMMs important? What do they look like on Stellar? What impact are they having? What does the future hold? And so, Phil, I'm going to start out with a question for you. What are some of the challenges inherent to liquidity provision, and how do AMMs address them?
Sure. So before AMMs, we have had a order book decentralized exchange, and providing liquidity and making markets on these decentralized exchanges, or even a centralized exchange, is pretty non-trivial. You have to understand the tech, understand risk management, know how to adjust bid and offers, and it was a challenge. We worked with a few partners and had some initial liquidity, but there had to be a long-term plan to grow liquidity if we're going to really achieve our payments use case. So one of the things that we saw with AMMs in other ecosystems last summer was the ability to draw in this liquidity. And I think one of the biggest things is the simplicity and the UI that it provides. An individual can deposit funds into a pool, and those funds essentially make a market for liquidity. So if I deposit asset A and asset B into a pool, that's all that's needed. I don't need to risk manage. I don't need to understand the technology or adjust bids and offers. It does it. There's some pros and cons with that, but just that simple UI makes this liquidity provision much more scalable for future use.
Great. And so we're going to hear more about ecosystem involvement, but for now, can you just tell me a bit about SDF's role in bringing AMMs to Stellar?
Yeah, this was one of the really cool things that I saw, right? Like it wasn't like, hey, we are going to build this, we put our heads down, we build it and release it. It was something that we discussed with the community. We recognized this need for scalable liquidity. There was discussions to build it into the protocol, and then we engaged the community to iterate on what was the best V1 for this. So it was a very, like, this was one of the things that I think, you know, the decentralization and kind of the community aspect of being at Stellar was really exciting, where, you know, a lot of people, including Dima and other community members, had real input into what was being built, and then being able for them to build on top of it and have something ready to go for day one.
And so they're building on top of something that we implemented at the protocol level. I guess, can you tell me a little bit more about what makes AMMs on Stellar unique?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, as you know, we do still have the DEX and we have the AMM. So like as you mentioned, Justin, it's built at the protocol level. Like when you look at other chains, it's a level above the protocol. So that in and of itself is a unique feature of Stellar AMMs. But another feature that I think is pretty interesting is that because there are two separate sources of liquidity, one being the AMM and one being the DEX, there's essentially a smart routing function that happens through Stellar Path payments. So if I send an order that I want to convert dollars to euro, the technology checks the best price on the DEX and also the AMM and will fill the conversion at wherever the best price is. So I think that's kind of a unique function. We see that in, you know, being built in across DeFi, but we also see that that's a natural function when you talk about equities, where there's a natural best bid and best offer that it has to go through a smart router so that you are guaranteed a best price.
Yeah, and so that's interesting. I mean, the way that AMMs work, to trade against an AMM, you essentially use an existing operation, the path payment operation, which you alluded to. So anyone who's building an interface that just already uses path payments gets the liquidity benefits that AMMs might bring. But there's the other side to that too. Like for the AMM to exist, there has to be a way for users to deposit into liquidity pools. And, you know, what was interesting to me was how quickly those interfaces were built. As we've said already, there were several that were available basically on the day the protocol upgraded, which is pretty cool. And I guess I'll turn to you, Dima, because I think it's remarkable what Ultrastellar built into StellarX. And I'd love for you to just sort of tell us more about what you built. And if you can, maybe even show us.
Yes, sure. So as soon as we realized that AMMs will be built into Stellar network, we started working on interface to give access to our users to AMMs. And we decided to build it into StellarX product. And sure, I can show you some slides to have some understanding of what we have built. Let me know if you can see my screen.
I sure can.
Cool. So we have analytics session. It's where you can see liquidity of AMM pools. It's like overview page. You can check daily volume. You can check top AMM pools. You can see details of every pool. For example, XLM USDC pool. You can check its liquidity, its daily volume, latest transactions, and other stats. For sure, you can add liquidity or remove, or you even can create new liquidity pools if they were not created before. And you can manage your, let's say, AMM portfolio. You can check some stats. You can control everything from here. So in few words, we built a tool that can that provides option to our users to interact with AMMs, to provide liquidity, and at the same time, it's quite convenient to check some stats and metrics on analytics pages.
Have you gotten much feedback from users so far?
Yeah, it's quite impressive how it started. It's only 2 weeks since AMMs went live, and it's impressive because we received like more than 5,000 of requests from people to try AMMs and StellarX from day one, because we started as beta testing, but now it's open for everyone. And yeah, a lot of people using AMMs, so we have a lot of positive feedback. Yeah, our users seems happy.
That's great. Yeah, it's a nice intuitive user interface, right? Like it just, we sort of talked about Phil mentioned the UI, and the idea, right, is that an interface should make it easy for a user to deposit liquidity and to understand what they're doing when they do it, and then to withdraw liquidity when they want. And it's cool that it could just sort of slot into your existing product, right? That you could add functionality to StellarX that already existed, that just like was kind of like a new feature for users. And it seems like people get it, right? It is very intuitive, which is awesome. I guess my next question for you, Dima, is like, as a builder on Stellar, have you seen benefits from having AMMs built in at the protocol level?
Yeah, sure. I believe I think it's, that yeah, AMMs never were built into any network protocol before. This is first time probably, and we definitely have some benefits. For example, we can start with network benefits like fast transactions and almost zero fees for any AMM transactions. What else? I think this is great that we have like common core, let's say, of this AMM system, and all Stellar ecosystem projects, they interact with the same thing, comparing to other network, like Phil mentioned. It's so every project works on the same idea, let's say. They have the same goal, like StellarX, Stellarport, and other products. They participate in some common thing, adding liquidity to the same pools, bringing more liquidity, adding some volume to daily volume of all these AMM pools. And as a result, we have better exchange rates for multiple pairs, assets, pools. What else can I say? Oh, I also think that a big advantage of having AMMs on protocol level is that it was distributed really easy. As Phil mentioned, we every project that had pass payments implemented, for example, as a part of swap functionality, get their access to AMMs easily at day one on November 3rd when Protocol 18 went live, which is great. It was the easiest upgrade for projects, I would say. So yeah, quite a lot of benefits.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it was amazing to see Ultrastellar and others building these interfaces that allowed people to deposit liquidity on Stellar, and it's amazing to see existing Stellar wallets be able to benefit from that liquidity. Phil, I guess there was something different about the way that SDF and the ecosystem as a whole sort of collaborated on this protocol rollout to introduce this new feature. Can you talk a bit about like sort of how we made the launch happen quicker than previous launches?
Yeah, so in the past, when protocols launched, there was a delay between when users can actually access it. For this one, it was the effort was made where on day one, users had access to the product. They can touch it, they can feel it, they can interact with it, and that was because of the what I previously mentioned, where that collaboration of leading up to that protocol release, the constant communication with the community and Dima and his team and others in the community to build these front ends, right, to make sure things were ready for launch. So I think this was kind of unique because that feedback loop was an ongoing loop, and it wasn't like we're going to build something and then release something and then others can build on top of it. There was, the starting line was coordinated, and the fact that it went smoothly was a big achievement.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, in order to roll it out, it was interesting because I know that we at SDF talked to the ecosystem and asked about, hey, what resources would be helpful, And I know that unlike other protocol rollouts where basically developers got access to the API, because most developers, they don't interact with Stellar core, like the Stellar protocol code in the raw, right? They actually interact via API. And so like a lot of the feedback that we got was, hey, can you just like share the API spec, the API contract earlier, or create a mock API environment? And we did both those things. And we also set up like a future net, which was basically, the test net is a stable version of the protocol release, but we just set up one that was like bleeding edge and said, hey, people, you can start experimenting on this. There might be some changes, but you can at least start to tease out and build against something. And I think like the rollout of those resources early was super instructive for us because at SDF, because it allowed us to get better feedback from the people who were actually going to build on the feature. And I think it was helpful for the ecosystem because they could take those resources and get a head start. Anyway. And I mean, so it's been only 2 weeks, which isn't a ton of time, but I think that we already have started to see some impact. And so Phil, I guess I want to start with you and talk about the sort of early results of AMMs. How have you seen AMMs impact liquidity on the network overall?
So the initial numbers are pretty promising. We've seen, let me pull up some stats. 1,700 new unique pool providers. There's over 1,600 liquidity pools. And I mean, those two stats just signify people are using these. There's new assets, there's new pools that neither previously existed. So given this initial uptake, we're seeing people building new things that previously couldn't because there might not be liquidity, right? So now with new assets, new pools, some other way to exchange value that is very simple and easy, we have this new innovation. And some of the other stats that I think are pretty interesting is that out of the 1,200 unique providers, about 10% of them are providing liquidity in 5+ pools. So this signifies to me that, it's not just individuals. There are people that are actually seeing liquidity provision as a benefit, right, to themselves. So I think these are kind of promising numbers. Numbers are all up and to the right. So like that's exciting to see.
Are there any spreads that we've seen decrease? Any like notable decreases in spreads?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So one of the things that we've seen specifically in Argentina. So for those of you that know or don't know, Argentina dollar rates, there are numerous. There's at least 4 or 5 that I know of, and the spreads are large. So the cost of exchanging between the Argentinian peso and the US dollar is expensive. So when the AMMs were released, the spreads narrowed to 1%, which is, I think, the best, tightest spread that I've seen in Argentina on the blue dollar rate has been around 1.5. I think that in and of itself is really exciting to see.
So like, what does that mean? What does that mean for an end user to have a spread that's lower than the blue dollar rate?
So if we're looking at a 1.5% spread, it basically is the cost of the exchange from one asset to another. So it's actually half the cost because you're only paying one side. But if I wanted to exchange $1 for a peso or vice versa, I'm basically paying at least 75 basis points. But with AMMs, that's with a 1% spread, you're only paying 50 basis points. So that is a 33% improvement on your cost.
So it's cheaper for people who are converting currencies. The cost is lower for them. It's better.
The cost is lower, yeah. And when we're thinking about cross-border payments, I think we can envision some future state where this is not just USDC peso, right? We could think about all different fiat assets that are tokenized into stable coins, and these AMM pools are enabling cheaper and more efficient FX transactions.
Cool. And Dima, you sort of shared in one of your slides the cool dashboard that StellarX has up. Are there any stats that you've noticed on there that sort of speak to how the last 2 weeks have gone?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we went completely, I mean, to full live program now, starting with beta testing, and AMMs on StellarX are available for everyone today. So thousands of people already using AMMs, interacting with pools, etc. And we have some noticeable metrics already, like TVL parameter, total value locked, which is more than $13 million. Today in different Stellar assets. Yeah, Stellar and StellarX users created more than 1,500 of different pools, and more happens every day. So I would say, during these 2 weeks, a lot of things happened, but it's definitely something noticeable and people like it. So we'll have really nice and cool metrics really soon, even bigger numbers. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, I guess we're already sort of starting to trend this way, but let's talk about what's next for AMMs. And we actually have a lot of audience questions coming in about this, which I'll ask. But first, I just kind of want to know from your point of view, Dima, with all these customers participating in liquidity pools, what impact do you see AMMs having on your business going forward?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. I think we can expect user-based growth as a main parameter. I think we'll have a lot of people from other networks who would like to try AMMs on Stellar because of its fast and cheap transactions. I think we can expect a lot of new Stellar assets created because today it's quite easy to implement market making for your asset. So issuers became more free. In this sense, they don't need to create some difficult things on order books, but it's still the option. I see swap functionality will be prioritized in our products because it's easy to use and simple, and provides users with better exchange rates because of these things that Phil was talking about. The past payments became much smarter and they can go through SDX or through AMM and give better rates. And overall, I mean, since we will have AMMs, we will have better liquidity, and with good liquidity, we have more options and opportunities as developers to build something new. I see big opportunities for cross-border payments, for example, and many other things that can be done with good liquidity on network.
Cool. There are a couple of questions about plans for the StellarX interface. I guess the first one is, will you implement a way to view the fees gained when you add liquidity to a pool?
Yeah, I think we already have some information about fees, but we are planning to expand this section in our interface, definitely.
Yeah, I got to say, I mean, given how new AMMs are, right? Like the protocol upgraded 2 weeks ago. Normally, in past protocol upgrades, we wouldn't even see a product that took advantage of the new feature for months yet. And so, like, it's pretty cool that there's all this data already, and it seems like continuing to think about interesting data to provide users. I imagine that's something we at SDF will continue to do, right? We'll think, okay, what are what are the interesting numbers that we can gather from the network. But I imagine at StellarX, you'll also continue to iterate on your dashboard, provide more information, improve the user experience.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We have a lot of plans connected to AMM functionality in our in StellarX. I'm sure we'll have a lot of different announcements soon. I'm not sure that I can share everything now, but yeah, we mostly focused on AMMs now, improving swap functionality, make everything super clear for our users. And
when you say that, because there's another question here that says, since StellarX has both a DEX and LPs, is there a clear solution between the two? Are you sort of going to help users decide? I don't know. It sounds like you're one thing that you're thinking about is tending to favor swap functionality because you think it provides a better user experience. Is that accurate?
It depends.
It depends.
Swap functionality can be useful for those who want to exchange something fast and with better rate. And SDX still has its own benefits. You can create orders as you wish. You can create limit orders and control your trades more detailed, let's say. So we are planning to keep both SDX and AMM functionalities separate, and we planning to develop them. But at the same time, we have swap functionality, which works with both options, which is great.
Cool. And I guess the other question, or the other question about the future of AMMs, right? So Protocol 18 launched basically a fairly opinionated MVP version of AMMs on Stellar. Part of the reason that I think we did that, and you can read about this in a blog post that the SDF published, but like after a bunch of community and ecosystem interaction, the idea was, let's start with the simple design. Let's see how people use it. But I guess there are a couple of questions here, and maybe I'll point these to Phil, about what's the future of AMMs. And I'm going to read you one specific one, but then you can sort of take it from there, right? So for AMMs, what are the plans for different curves and different fees is the first one. And the second is more general. We've seen AMMs like Uniswap continue to iterate from V1 now to V3. Since AMMs on Stellar at the protocol level, how challenging will it be to iterate new versions in the future? So I guess it's a two-part question for the last 3 minutes. What are the plans? What are the challenges? Phil?
Sure. So I'll start with the first one. I think the future, look, this just got released, and the way that we view it is this is the beginning. I think AMMs getting released was step one. This was a very MVP. There's already discussions internally on things that we're going to do to improve on the V1. So some of the discussions have been on optimizing bonding curves, right? This, without getting too technical, what that means is that spread that we're talking about, the cost of conversion, we're working on the math that makes that cost lower. Another one is single-sided liquidity provision. Right now, if you want to deposit into liquidity pools, it has to be 2 tokens, right? Like, in the future, to improve the UI, depositing 1 token by itself it will be even easier and should attract more liquidity. Other things we're thinking about is with liquidity pool tokens, where you can tokenize your position. So if I deposit into a liquidity pool, that stake that I have in the pool, I can actually use potentially for other things like collateral or even trade that token. So those are some of the things that that are continually being discussed. So keep an eye out for those. And as always, if people have suggestions on things that they're seeing or exciting things that we can improve on this V1, we'd love to hear it. And on the second, so that's actually with 1 minute relating. That's an interesting question. So one of the positives of having the protocol built in, having the AMMs built at the protocol level, is that it's interoperable. Anybody building on top of it has that functionality. But one of the challenges is that it's built into the protocol. So that is something that we're actively thinking about, and would love to engage the community to hear suggestions if there are ways that they think that there's better collaboration and ways we can figure out how others can build on top of the core protocol level.
Yeah, and I want to just end by talking about the story that we sort of mentioned at the top, which was that for this rollout of this new feature, we did bring the ecosystem in, and not even bring them in. We worked with the ecosystem from the beginning, right? So that there was a sort of SDF broader ecosystem collaboration. And I think that we learned a lot doing that. And part of the lesson is do that again, do that more. And so we will continue to iterate on AMMs, right? So that they continue to improve at the protocol level. And we'll do that by continuing to reach out to the ecosystem and find ways to speed the process, find ways to get them involved. And again, we would love any feedback that anyone has about better ways to do that. But we are out of time. So Phil, Dima, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. And Dima, StellarX looks amazing. Thanks for building that. There are all kinds of great interfaces out there that people have built to take advantage of AMMs. And we're super excited to see what happens next. But alas, we will have to move on. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Justin.
All right. We're in the home stretch of day one now, and we have got one more quick break before the last session, which is a fireside chat with Danelle and SDF's co-founder and chief architect, Jed McCaleb. So please take this opportunity to stretch, grab a snack, meet me back here in a few minutes. This is a conversation you don't want to miss.
Yes. It's
Okay, everyone, I hope that you had a good break, that you did stretch your legs. We're going to take it back over to our in-office studio in San Francisco and give a warm welcome to Lauren Thorbjornsen, SDF's head of communications. Lauren's going to moderate our next session, which is a fireside chat with SDF CEO and executive director, Danelle Dixon, and SDF co-founder and chief architect, Jed McCaleb. We'd love your participation in this session too. We have left some time at the end for audience questions, and we invite you to submit them in the Q&A tab. Lauren, we're so glad to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Justin. I'm really excited to be here at Meridian and to be hosting this fireside chat with our co-founder Jed and our CEO and executive director Danelle. We have a half an hour to pick their brains and to help you guys get to know them better as leaders and also to get to know them a little better personally. So I have a bunch of questions to ask them, but I also want to hear from you guys. So make sure you submit your questions to the Q&A tab in the chat. And Jed, Danelle, are you guys ready for this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get started by talking tactics and strategy. Jed, this first one's for you. So I feel like the blockchain industry has grown exponentially. Every time I look, there's like a new L1 blockchain out there. How do we make sure that Stellar is relevant for the next 5, 10, 20 years and really is in this competitive environment?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot going on out there in the world. There's a lot to keep up with. I mean, I think this is true of all software industries, is that there's always a lot of change. I mean, that's the nature of software, is that it's very iterative and you can build on top of it and keep improving it. And you kind of have to stay on top of things and in order to stay relevant and keep delivering the features that people are wanting. And Stellar, it will have to do that, right? So basically we can't just stay where we are. We have to keep adding new things, like we just added the AMM thing, and we're working on a lot of other future forward-looking projects and things to bring to the network. So we'll just keep doing that. I mean, that's really all you can do, is just keep building.
Yeah. So, you want to add anything?
I think it's also listening to the ecosystem and helping to understand what the ecosystem wants. So sometimes we don't see it all as quickly. And I think it's pretty cool for the ecosystem to be able to provide that feedback to us so that we can do the feedback loop. We can support them as they're building projects. Things that we might not even think about could be relevant on Stellar. They can help us to decide what that looks like.
Yeah. Okay, next question to you. So you started today by recapping all these really great achievements, AMMs, MoneyGram, Tala, and so obviously things are looking really pretty strong for the Stellar ecosystem, but is there anything that you wish went differently?
I mean, this year has been just a phenomenal year in terms of bringing USDC onto the network, which having that stablecoin allows payments just to be able to flow much more seamlessly and allows other folks to be able to build on that. I mean, the truth is, I wish that could have happened even a year ago. And so then this year would be focused more on just the growth and grow and grow and grow, because that's what I want to see us do. So, I mean, in terms of what we did, it's just that what the ecosystem at large has done is just dramatic and magical, but I don't ever feel like it's enough. I feel like we just need to push ourselves to do more and more and more. And it's the same from a technical standpoint. I want us to be able to respond and to grow and to develop. And we just, we can never do it fast enough for the ecosystem. And you see so much that's going on out there, and we need to be very focused on maintaining that stability, that scalability, that security, but also really changing. And so I'd like to be able to do all of that faster.
Yeah, of course. All right, this is a question for both of you. So this year has been phenomenal, but also really busy in blockchain as a whole. So, there's been headline topics for policymakers, regulators, flurry of reports, recommendation, legislation. Candace was talking earlier, it just kind of seems all over the world. And I think this has caused a lot of anxiety in the industry, rightly so. So I'm curious what you guys see as your role in trying to make sure that we see the policy outcomes that help the network and the ecosystem. And are you worried that it could go in the wrong direction? You want to start?
Sure. I mean, Danelle's more involved on the policy side than I am, but at least from my point of view, I think it's our job to kind of help educate policymakers and make sure that they understand how this technology actually works, because it's actually quite complicated, and I think it's very easy to have a misconception about what it actually is doing, and just sort of try to stay engaged as much as we can and help shape the narrative, right? And so. Yeah, I mean, that's basically our role and kind of all we can do. I mean, to me, it seems like I would say it's always been pretty uncertain what the policy situation is in the blockchain world. And if anything, it's getting a little more clear as time goes by, as you can kind of see what companies and what things have been had actions against them and what haven't, and things like that. So it's becoming a little more clear. It's still very murky, but to me, it seems like the situation is slightly better than it has been in the past. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add on that is that the way that you do education, I think so much of it for years has been on the tech stack. And I think that talking to policymakers and regulators about the tech stack doesn't actually engage them on the issues that they care about for their districts. Whether that be in the US or even outside of the US and all these different regions, they care about impacting and creating better space and better services for their constituents. So what I think we need to really do is build the use cases with the ecosystem and then broadcast those use cases and talk about them as much as we can, because that actually makes them feel more comfortable that, yeah, there, could be challenges and we need to focus on regulation to maybe they feel like they need to focus on the edges of regulation, but the good is coming out of it. And I don't think that enough policymakers and regulators see the use cases, because we haven't spent enough time as an industry talking about that. So that's where I'd like us to sit. And I think we try to do that over and over by talking about the different folks that are building on the network and the value that they're bringing to their users. So I think that that's the way to get us to the place. That's our role and our responsibility. And then, am I fearful? What I'm fearful of is that we don't continue to do that engagement enough, because it's not like a one stop, like you can walk in and be like, hey, this is cool, look at this. You have to really stay active in all these different regions. And so it's hard because there's so many places all around the world that are just now coming alive to this and feeling like, oh, wait, is this gonna hurt our own fiat? Is this gonna change our industry? Is it gonna create more inflation? So these are the things that we need to stay really vigilant about.
Yeah, quick follow-up on that. Some of these reports that came out, I think one of the big flags they've put out is regionally people could implement regulations differently, and what that could mean for cross-border payments and all that. Are you worried about different continents or countries or regions just addressing it differently and that causing issues for the ecosystem?
So I'm not, and maybe that's naive, but I look at the early days of the web, and there was this huge concern that some countries could create legislation that could stymie the continued innovation and growth of web technologies and what the web was doing. And I think that this is just another part of the web. And so again, I think if we focus on the value and how we're contributing value to the constituents in these regions, I don't think we're going to see that kind of thing. But it's always a concern, and it's always one of the things, especially in any kind of decentralized world, when you're thinking about web technologies as well as this, that different countries can create different rules around it. But I do think that'll be on the edges and not on the tech stack and not on the value that it can bring.
Right. I'm optimistic that the IGOs are going to come up with comprehensive recommendations for everyone to follow. Let's see. Okay, so I know you guys can't name names, but if you could make a wish list of categories, what use cases would you like to see come to Stellar?
our main thing is still cross-border payments, and I would really love to see that grow more. Obviously this MoneyGram integration is a huge step in that direction, but there's still obviously a lot of work to do there. I think beyond that, I think games and other just forms of sort of these peer-to-peer marketplaces where things like Etsy and stuff like that. In order for those to go global, or Patreon, things like that. In order for those to go global, they could really benefit from some technology like Stellar, and I would love to see those folks start to adopt something like us. Yeah.
Etsy on Stellar. I'm into that.
Yeah, I think that I love the idea of gaming platforms that are leveraging microtransactions and that can then have assets that can transfer amongst games. I think that's a super cool, because it's using the thing that we're really good at, asset issuance and also payments. And so that to me would be a really awesome use case to be able to bring. But my favorite use case, and it's one that I really think that it would be great to see some developers out there focus on, is the payroll use case and the paying gig workers. And I think it's just a really awesome, when you're thinking about cross-border payment and really getting the money to the folks that really need it, are these gig workers or these folks that live outside in another country, and it takes a long time for them to get their money in the traditional system. So I think blockchain can really be powerful for that.
Yeah. Okay, you mentioned gaming, so I'm just curious, personal question, do either of you game?
I have lots of children that game. I don't actually game. I try to sometimes play with them. We play Smash and I suck, so.
More as a kid. I try not to these days, but yeah.
Okay, cool.
I like
All
games.
right, I'm gonna check an audience question now, so let me see what we have coming in here. Okay, here's a good one, I think, and I think either of you could take this one on. What are your thoughts on payment channels versus side chains, and how that plays into the future for us to scale?
Yeah. So I think it's definitely important for like the long-term vision of it. I think like today it's probably not necessary just because things scale pretty well on Stellar. Definitely compared to other blockchains out there. But yeah, definitely like if we want to start handling like the global payment volume, we're going to have some solution there. And so we do have like a program working on this now, but it's definitely like more like 2 years out was when it'll actually be needed. So yeah.
But it's pretty cool that we're working on it now. And if you haven't watched, you should watch Lee's presentation on it. He's talking about payment channels and the work we've done there. And I think you can find that on the Meridian website. The other thing is, like, if you want something like Etsy to be on Stellar, like this, either a sidechain or payment channels could actually be super useful for that. So for sure.
Right. Okay, I have this new section. I'm going to start up questions here. I'm calling it Misunderstandings and Misconceptions. So I want to hit on some things that come up now and again and that people just either are confused about or don't really fully understand. So Jed, and I don't know where this rumor ever came from or originated, maybe you know, but it's definitely stuck around. Can you set the record straight? Is Stellar a fork of Ripple?
No, it's not a fork of Ripple. I mean, obviously they're similar at a high level. Like when you describe them to somebody, they sound very similar. Obviously I had a hand in both of them. So I think, the code is totally different. The consensus algorithm is totally different. Yeah, they're just totally different networks at this point. So,
okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for setting the record straight. Hope everyone heard that one. Not a fork. Okay, Danelle. Every now and again, we hear people say that SDF doesn't care about non-payment use cases. Obviously, you just said your dream was a gaming one. So is that true?
No, I think, well, here's the thing. Again, what do we focus on from the Stellar network standpoint? What is it really good at? Asset issuance and payments. But we also recognize that, for example, AMMs are really important for liquidity. And so that's something that was built into the network so that others could actually build the interface and make that work. And I think that's been around for 14 days. And we've actually seen a lot of liquidity brought in and usage of that. I think that there's also, what we're focused on at SDF is making sure that the code base and that, the contributions that we see others it's a lot focused on payments. But the truth is, like, even in the gaming context, that is really about payments. It is about the fact that if you have these microtransactions, it's one of my favorite things to think about how you can bring web technologies that, one of the things in the early days of the web, we could never get microtransactions to work. But underlying that is all of payments methodology. And so even if it's like gaming, or even if it's like NFTs, or even if it's like, I don't know, you name it, in terms of the other things that you can do with it, you're still leveraging the asset issuance and the payments part of the technology. But, in terms of those use cases, I think it's awesome what people develop. I think it's awesome how they, Lightment's out there and has been building the NFT marketplace on Stellar. Way to go. Good for them. I think it's a really cool thing for folks to be able to do that. Take this technology and build on it in ways that we don't think about here.
Yeah. Okay, another one for you to know. So one of our earliest enterprise fund investments was in Abra. And since then, there's been some rumbling in the ecosystem about when we'd actually see the Abra to integrate with Stellar. And can you maybe just let us know where things stand with Abra to clear up any confusion?
Yeah, I think I said this during our last quarterly call as well. And when I get asked this question very often. And I think that Abra was our second enterprise fund investment. I still think it was a good investment. I still think we're going to see a lot of value being brought to the ecosystem. It's Abra's products, it's Abra's plan about how they're going to deliver on the integrations with Stellar. There are regulatory, the regulatory environment in terms of licenses, in terms of all those things come into play and create challenges sometimes. But I think people just need to stay tuned. I think we're going to see value from them. I think there's a lot that's happened even this year that brings a lot of opportunity for an organization like Abra. And so I'm still excited about the investment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for helping set the record straight on these things. Maybe we'll have others come up, but I'll leave that section there for now, unless either of you have one. I had a question actually I was thinking about, which is, you guys obviously get interviewed a lot. And so I'm wondering if there's any questions that people ask you or don't ask you that you wish they would ask you.
I don't know. Yeah.
I think a lot of times when we get interviewed, most often separately, is that you're focused on like whatever the thing is that we're talking about. Most recently, it's been a lot of MoneyGram or AMM stuff that we're talking about. And sometimes I think it would be just really cool for us to be able to sit down and just talk about like what really happens on Stellar and what's the value of it, not in a way to try to like sell anything and to like bring anything to light. It's just to like, there's so much coolness that is delivered in the technology. And I don't think we have oftentimes in interviews, because they're short, they're snippets, you don't get to really tell the full story. But I can't think of one question.
Okay, Jed, thank you for clearing all those up. I wanted to touch on something that I think a lot of people maybe don't know about you, but is that you, like giving back and philanthropy is really important to you. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the causes you care about and that you support.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I recently set up this foundation, Astera Institute, that's basically focused on essentially improving the process of science and what we call like frontier technology, like these kind of radical programs that maybe wouldn't be funded by either like academia or the corporate world. So really the purpose is just to increase like the rate of progress and improvement in the world, basically. And so I think that's like a big underutilized lever that could really help things. So that's mainly what we focus on.
Cool. That's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm going to take another quick audience question here. And Danelle, I think this one is probably best for you, which is, I think there seems to be some confusion about
I saw that question come up recently, actually. What I think folks are referring to is that in the mandate, we are unlocking, there's the last tranche of lumens that comes unlocked for the foundation in 2023, I think it is. And so there's concern that what's going to happen to us after that. And I mean, the truth is we still have a lot of the lumens that have already been unlocked, and we're definitely focused on continuing to be around for years and years and years to come. And it's all about using the assets that we have in the right way. So remember, we have the assets for the foundation. We call that direct development. And then we have all of what we call Stellar's lumens, which sit in the rest of the mandate page to talk about all the grants that we do, the ecosystem grants that we put out there, the currency endpoints, there's all of those. So we still have a lot to be able to contribute back to the ecosystem from Stellar's lumens. And then we also have our direct development that, you know, we will continue to live off of for a really long time in terms of really using those resources in a way that's smart from the standpoint of the foundation and also from the ecosystem. So I still see us being around after 2023, even though I think that's what some of the concern was.
I need a job, so hopefully we're still here. So I have another question, audience question here, which is kind of how are we working to make it easier for anchors to onboard?
Well, that is a really important part of what our goals are for 2022, to be honest. Like this is some of the work that we did in Tiger Teams is to really think about like productizing all of these tools that are out there so that you don't have to know proposal numbers like proposed SEP numbers or and think about it from that standpoint that it's, I mean, David always talks about like anchor in a box and making it really simple. What we have tested the engineering team with and the product team with this year for 2022 is to really be able to get start to finish and anchor through within a month. We've seen it happen already, but you know, I think for the most part, it takes a bit longer. And we think that the documentation is awesome, but you really need to think about it from a tooling standpoint. It should be really self-serve. It should be as easy as other folks out there that are in the payment space, in the traditional payment space, that you can integrate really quickly and simply. So that is our goal. Please test us on this and hold us accountable to it, because it's one of the things that I want to see us do very, very quickly, and to be able to create these products and for the usefulness of the ecosystem.
Awesome. All right, let's take a little business break, get into a little some personal questions. So I know both of you really love to spend time with your families, and I'm curious, what's your favorite family activity? Like, what would you guys do on like a typical Friday night?
Well, we don't do this on a Friday night, but you know, I surf, and I think very early on when my kids were small, I took them surfing too early and they got scared of it. And just now they're like coming back around to it and wanting to go. So that's been super exciting for me to actually like have fun in the water with them. So
that's fun.
Yeah, so we like board games, and when all of our boys are home, a lot of them are at school right now, when they're home, we like to do this thing called fun, which is you all put a bunch of words in a hat, essentially, and then you pull those out, and sometimes you're doing charades, sometimes you're doing like you can't say that word, but you can say other words around it, and sometimes you have to just act the whole thing out completely and not say any words at all. And so there's like, that's what we do a lot, and the family really loves it. The other thing that we do, and Jed's actually participated in this at us, is we really like to play hide and seek. And Jed introduced us to sardines,
Sardines, yeah.
which is a different form of hide and seek, which is also super fun.
What's sardines? Now I'm curious.
It's basically like inverse hide and seek. One person hides, you all look for them, and then if you find them, you hide with them. And so like slowly people
Oh,
disappear,
you
and it
have
gets
to-
pretty
okay.
scary if you're like the last person there.
One time we did it, and they're all the adults. So Jed and I, his partner, my partner, and then one of our sons who's like 6 foot tall, we're hiding in a closet together while all the other kids
Okay, you
were
can hear them out there.
And they didn't actually ever find us.
I like this idea. My daughter's really into hide and seek, but she tells me where to hide. I think I'll do sardines and I'll just be like, I'll hide, come find me. And then I have a little time to myself. Okay, a couple questions about your guys' preferences. So do you prefer reading fiction or nonfiction?
Oh, I like both. I mean, I read more nonfiction these days. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I like reading fiction as well, but I like reading nonfiction.
Okay, and hard copy, or do you guys use a Kindle or an e-reader?
No, I like paper.
I do
Yeah,
too. I like the smell of the book.
Do you guys have a library card?
I do have a library card, but I don't. I'll just be honest and say I don't use it. Most of the books are purchased, frankly, when I'm at an airport.
Yeah.
I go in and I buy a book to get on a plane.
I always do that too.
Yeah, it's been a while since I had a library card. Yeah, Amazon.
If you guys were going to sit down, would you watch a documentary or would you watch a sitcom?
Mm.
You know, depends on how burned out I am, but probably documentary. Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of sitcoms, but I like things to be like, so like the Queen's Gambit was like one of those ones. I love to sit down and like you get totally mired in what's happening there. But
Yeah. Okay. Queen's Gambit was obviously like a binge-worthy during COVID. You know, it's a very popular time for us to like deep dive on things. What was the best movie or show that you watched while you were cooped up at home last year, or the past year and a half, really?
we just finished the first 2 seasons of Ted Lasso and I loved it.
Yeah, I liked
it.
Ted
It was
Lasso.
like everybody talked about it and I'm so not one of those people who does the things that everybody else does because I'm always like, I don't need to do that. And then we did and I was so happy that we did.
I think that the Ken Burns Vietnam documentary, which is pretty amazing. You should definitely watch it if you haven't seen it. Yeah.
That's a time commitment, right?
Yeah. It's one of the best things I've seen. It's super good. Yeah.
Really? Okay, good to know. I have to say, just for me personally, maybe nobody cares, but Carolyn, who's on our team, will care. I'm Formula One Drive to Survive. If you haven't watched it, it's a Netflix docuseries about Formula One. Highly recommend it. Okay, but so speaking of buying books in the airport, so travel restrictions are starting to relax a little bit. What would you guys say is your dream vacation?
You mean destination part?
Destination. Where would you go? If you could just like hop on a plane right now.
So I just want to go somewhere where there's water and it's a beach. And I mean, we go to Hawaii. I love Hawaii for our family vacations, but really anywhere where I can get in the warm water.
Yeah, basically the same answer. Yeah, as long as there's a nice
Surfing?
break. Yeah, I'm pretty happy. So,
Okay, I'm curious, how did you get into surfing? Because didn't you grow up in,
in Arkansas?
Yeah.
There's a lot of beaches
not there.
landlocked.
Yeah, no, I learned in New York, actually. I was living in New York, and then someone told me you could surf out at Rockaway, and you could take the train there. So I started going. Yeah, it's been fun.
interesting, I don't know, I grew up in Illinois, so I'm a little intimidated by the ocean. Okay, we're back to businessy questions. Danelle, this one is maybe for you. What's the update on the CbdCs in Ukraine?
Well, we're still working with them. We've talked a lot about, we're working with them to work on their digital asset infrastructure with the Ukrainian government. It's been just a really great partnership. And we're working also with others in the government to support what they need to think about from a digital asset infrastructure. You know, I had the honor of meeting with President Zelensky this year, and I was just so impressed by how thoughtful they are about where they want to get to, because not everyone has the goal that sometimes people put these small goals in front of themselves, but he has this really amazing goal about creating a cashless economy. And that's something that he's really committed to. He's hired a lot of the right people to be committed to. One of the things they're doing is really focused on bringing talent in and outside talent into their country, and also bringing a lot of focus on blockchain. And so from there, I feel like we're going to get to a place where I would love it if Ukraine was one of the first that actually issued a Cbdc, but we're still working with them. It's a great relationship and we're happy to have that partnership.
Cool. People are anxious to know how soon there's going to be a Cbdc on Stellar. So people are happy for that update.
I want to know too.
Yeah. Jen, maybe this one's for you. Do you think that there's an opportunity for NFT specific protocols on top of the assets features?
On Stellar. Yeah, I mean, I think some people have proposed like SEPs to like have NFTs work on Stellar, and I think there could be more work there. Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely would make sense. I mean, I think Stellar is a good platform for it if you like get those protocols correct. So yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely room for it. So yeah.
Okay, sustainability questions. You know, obviously Stellar is one of the more energy efficient payment networks available today, which is awesome. But have you guys thought about what it could take to get us someday to something like carbon neutral?
Well, we're doing our own. We've hired a third party to work with us to be able to do some analysis around the whole of Stellar. I think we had Wilhelm who did some analysis around the protocol, which actually came out to be like really, really low impact. And from a sustainability standpoint, a really good score. We also have to layer in Horizon and think about all the different components to it. It would be awesome to get to zero carbon emissions and think about it from that standpoint. And certainly one of the first things that you need to do to be able to achieve that is to figure out what really is the status that we have. So holistically, not just the protocol, not just the network, but all the different components that come into it. So hopefully we'll have that answer and then we'll be able to talk more about that.
Okay, let's see here. I'm going to take one more audience question, then I'm going to wrangle Jed and Danelle into a game for a couple of minutes that they are begrudgingly participating in, and then we'll come back to some audience questions. Are there any plans for more community engagement in 2022, maybe specifically with the Reddit community or other places?
I feel like someone can put about, I would love to be able to have is like a model where it's not at all dependent on the SDF to be able to have these kinds of get-togethers and events, and that it's more of a self-service model, and we can support that in ways that we can. So I think that it's important for us to be able to support all areas and avenues of the ecosystem, and to do it so that it can be more impactful than just our ability to make it happen with the resources that we have, but to have other people out there who are also bringing people together. We already see a lot of this with Stellar Global and the engagement that Stellar Global has, but I want to see more. Again, like I'm one of those people, it's never enough. Yeah. It's really hard to be one of my children.
That's true. Okay, well, actually, I'm going to ask you this one question really quick before we go to the game, which is how soon will partnerships like Circle, MoneyGram, and the likes be open for every wallet to integrate?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Circle is like you can integrate with and utilize USDC now. Like anybody can do it. You just have to use the Circle APIs. And then in terms of the MoneyGram, stay tuned, right? Like I am so excited to get MoneyGram out there as soon as where the pilot is going to help us to determine like where are there bugs or features that we didn't know about that we want to be able to get through. And then once we get it out there to the world, the whole point is if your wallet is Stellarized or Stellar enabled, you should just be able to get into the process. So that's the value of the global network that we have that can be able to do that. So stay tuned, hopefully really soon.
Okay. Jed, did you want to add anything to that before we get to
your favorite game?
That's a good, yeah, I mean, yeah. That's...
Okay, here are their signs. Here's how this works. I'm going to give them a couple topics, not a lot, because I want to get back to your guys' questions, but they're going to vote a few things that are hot in the industry or just in life, underrated or overrated. And they can't look at each other, but you will have an opportunity to respond.
I'm going to get confused about whether it's under or over because it's very hard.
You can correct yourself when you want to. Okay, but don't look at what the other person's doing.
Can I correct myself as soon as I see Jed's answer?
Yes. Okay, ready? WFH, working from home. Okay, I think we agree. Everyone burnt out after.
Yeah, you just can't collaborate in the same way that you can in person.
I love seeing humans. Yeah. Like it's awesome to be able to just, even when we've been back here and can have lunch together and stuff, it's really cool.
Yeah, it is. I agree. Okay, tungsten cubes. Okay, overrated. I think I'm in the Danelle camp. Yeah. Jed, explain your underrated.
Oh, I mean, it's just awesome. It's a very heavy cube. What can be better? Yeah.
Lots of utility there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next one is Web 3.0.
I don't know what Web 3.0 is yet, so I'm going to say overrated.
I don't know how it's rated, so I
That's fair.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm super excited about Web 3.0. I just want someone to define it fully for me. So.
And do you want them to define the metaverse for you also?
Yes. I mean, I kind of understand the metaverse because I've read the books out there that talk about like the gaming industry and how that could be it. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, last one. I'm just gonna ask you guys this one. What about San Francisco, where we are right now?
Yeah, worst
Oh.
run city in the U.S., if not the world. Yeah,
But it could be
unfortunately.
so much
Yeah.
better though. Like
could be
that's the
amazing.
thing. I think
Yeah.
that's why I say underrated. It's underrated because I think it could be, and it has historically been more amazing than it is today.
Okay. Well, I could have asked you guys Miami, which is apparently, or the new hotspot. So Jed, Danelle, we're almost at time. I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And are there any last remarks you'd like to share before we hand it back to Justin to wrap up Meridian for day one?
No, just really excited to be here at Meridian and to have this happen. I can't wait for us to do it in person though.
Yeah, super excited for the next Meridian. We'll be in person.
Hopefully, don't hold us accountable to this too. I want it to be in the first 6 months of next year. We'll see.
You heard it here. All right, Justin, back to you.
Okay, thank you. That was awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Nell. Thanks, Jed. And also thanks